Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for May 6, 2022, the $25.5 billion edition. And we begin with that story as BP recorded a $25.5 billion charge for leaving Russia. In an article by the Washington Post, it notes that because of profit gorging against consumers, BP was able to offset some of that, but it was still totaled out to a $20.4 billion loss. So for those companies who don't think or don't prepare for black swan events, this is something that can happen to you. Next up, in a very disturbing article in the Wall Street Journal, whistleblowers allege that Facebook deliberately caused havoc in Australia to influence a new law. When Facebook blocked news in Australia in response to potential legislation making platforms pay publishers for content, it also took down pages of Australian hospitals, emergency services, and charities. Facebook publicly called this inadvertent. However, a whistleblower has claimed that this was deliberately done and allowed wide swaths of the Australian government and health services to be taken down. The goal, according to the whistleblower, was to exert maximum negotiating leverage over the Australian Parliament. So very disturbing if Facebook took this step with or without the knowledge of top executives. Next up, from Reuters, Russian banks are now facing significant sanctions as SBberbank is looking at swift removal. So if it cut SBberbank off, Russia's largest lender, from the SWIFT international payment system, it would wreak havoc on the bank. The bank had been previously spared from some of the harshest penalties because it was the main channel for oil and gas payments. And our final story comes to us from Eurasianet, a first-time contributor to the Daily Compliance News. And customs officials in Kazakhstan are feeling heat as prosecutors and anti-corruption investigators have heeded a signal from the president and embarked on intensive probes into customs services that have led to multiple arrests. A recent audit brought to light $375 million worth of damages to the state caused by bribes paid to customs officials to evade company or country taxes. And anyone who's ever tried to import into Kazakhstan knows the corrupt nature of their customs officials. So this is certainly welcomed, an anti-corruption probe from those doing business with that country. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.